You ready?
I'm ready.
Hi. Hi, welcome everyone to Artfare's Thursday evening series of live virtual studio visits, interviews, just the gift of gab going back and forth about art. Tonight we have Valincy Jean Patelli, Artfare artist from the Git, and we're really happy to have you actually in your studio tonight, right, madam?
Yeah, I'm in my studio.
And there you go. As I just realized, try to talk a little bit about your work tonight in relationship to Black queerness, androgyny, spirituality, ancestry, objects and heirlooms, the Middle Passage. We've got a lot to kind of go over, and I know you prepared some slides. And yes, and we'll also just really kind of get down into the nitty-gritty about your process. So I really thank you for being here tonight. And where are you right now?
I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in Red Hook. My studio is located in Red Hook, the Red Hook Gowanus border. Yeah, it's industrial area. It's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And have you been able to get there during quarantine? Have you been going a lot?
Yes. Yeah. Fortunately, we are a very small studio. There are 8 studios in our building, and the people who weren't able to be here kind of at the height of quarantine. They had children, they left New York, they just, they needed to be someplace else. So there were probably half of us left, and we were able to really respect space and, touch base to say, okay, I'm going to be in between these hours. What hours do you need to be here? Just because there were so many things unknown about, the coronavirus during that time. And New York had basically shut down. So the only place for me to come was my studio, my partner working at home. Yeah, so it was definitely a refuge to come in. I don't know if I made a lot of work during that time. I think I made more studies and thought about the future work that I wanted to do than actually producing work. But I did make some fun things. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Did you find, as you were processing everything, you're kind of, reinventing a handful of different practices or different processes? Did anything really stick?
Did anything really stick? Well, yes and no. Before shutdown, I was moving studios. So I was kind of able to move into a new space and work on some studies and just kind of figure out textures with my materials and different materials, how they work together. I can actually show you some. I'm gonna show some stuff. So like, for example, this is all paper and acrylic paint on top. And for me, it's like, it feels like leather, and it's everything I wanted it to be, but it's it's a little 4x6. So my idea is to do these much bigger, much bigger, and so everything was sort of packed up and still in boxes. So I was able to just work with the materials that were available to me without having to unpack a ton of stuff. And then I quarantined at home with my partner, who got very sick with coronavirus. And when I came back, I just started to unpack my things, and then realized, oh, I need to move spaces again, because the new space wasn't working for me. And it was just like this huge shift with being like, okay, take this space that's available now, take it, and then figure it out later. And one of my studio mates decided that she would have to be gone for a while, and she's like, take my space, and I did. So I was able to switch spaces, and now we have these really great ceramicists that are in our studio in my old space. So it's just kind of been like musical studio spaces here.
That's incredible. And I'm curious, your partner got Corona. However, did you
Yeah.
escape it, or were you
No,
asymptomatic?
I didn't escape it, but I definitely didn't have, I didn't get as sick as she did.
Mm,
Um, so we were really, home for over a month,
wow.
Um, but there was always a point where like, how bad is it? Are we going to the emergency room? No, it was always no. But when you have a temperature and it's 14 days with a temperature, it's not good for anybody, even though it was low. It wasn't good, but we made it, we made it through that, and very, very grateful um, that we know each other so well. We've also been together for many, many years, that we were able to take care of one another and also give each other space to just feel like shit, because it really does mess with your body.
It was really great that you had this studio space as an option
Yeah,
to,
no, definitely. Yeah.
go inward, but also, go back home to take care of your partner, but
Yeah.
then take
Yeah.
care of yourself
Yeah.
as well during the time. And I know a lot of artists, and we've talked about it at length with, a handful of other artists since quarantine. We've been doing these, since March, we've been doing these studio visits live. And I think some folks did feel a little bent out of shape about the fact that they weren't doing anything and they had
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely.
and then other folks were crazy productive. Well, we just, realize what kind of pressure we put on ourselves when all of a sudden we have to look inward and introspect, and the clutter, the cacophonous
Yeah.
life around us is no longer, um, shouting it. You got to do this, you got to do that, but
Yeah.
an internal striving to make work, and I must make it. There was also a pause for a lot of folks.
Yeah. No, definitely. You have to rest. You kind of you really have to listen to your body and slow down and rest. For me, it was, I would just come here to get away, you know. Um, but also it was an opportunity to really think about the scope of my work and where I wanted to go. And was I honoring the process that I set out to do, and what direction did I want to go in? So I got to be with my work and think about it in a way that when you're here and you're just sort of like, okay, let's just go. It was a nice, and I had a lot of anxiety about having to be so slow and thoughtful about things. And, I'm a thoughtful person, but this was like, all right, now you really have to slow down, Valincy, and take inventory of, the things that are important to you. And with that, I was able to just clear out a lot of clutter that I feel was holding me back creatively, with just taking on too many things, of saying, I could take it in this direction, I could take this body of work in that direction, and just letting it naturally kind of, going at its own pace, and that was really fantastic.
I mean, yeah. And speaking of the body and your work, specifically the image that we used of Grace Jones, the silk
Yeah.
screen prints, that work as a body, you emphasize some of your earliest memories of the iconic androgyny that
Yeah.
Grace Jones had. I was just hoping maybe we're gonna start looking at some of those images, that you
Yes.
shared a little screen share situation for us. We can kind of dive deeper into the
Yeah.
process and some of the work.
I'm gonna get this together, the screen share. There we go, screen share. Here we go. Share. Here we go. So I guess we can just kind of move forward to Grace Jones, since we started talking about her. I do have
We can do a little introduction. Yeah.
inspiration in the back. But yeah, welcome to my virtual studio visit. Today we're going to discuss, not just kidding, this is just like a little intro to show you guys the works that Carolina and I will be talking about today. My name is Valincy Jean Patelli. I'm an artist. I live in Brooklyn. I work in Brooklyn. And thank you for joining this talk. This is my face always. This is sort of like I found these phones walking down Marcy. I live in Bed-Stuy. I was walking down Marcy and I saw these phones and they were wrapped in like the plastic. And I'm like, we have no more pay phones. And I'm like, I'm taking these. Eventually I'll make something out of them. But here I just made like a cute selfie.
You look pretty tough there, Valincy.
It's just like my face. Here we go, Grace Jones. These are called bone grace, and for the obvious reasons why of this bone through her septum, but also the image on the left is the original drawing that I did, and this background color is called bone, and I was like, okay, so we can have two meanings here. This was a very different process for me and how I created this Grace Jones portrait, because I usually just freehand with spray paint and like crink pens and kind of just go in and add some glitter and make it really fun. But this was a brand new silhouette for me to work with. And so it was a series of underpaintings where you can notice the eyes, the red eyes, that was like sort of the beginning after I drew the silhouette. And then with the eyebrows and the mouth, there's an underpainting of this high acrylic white. And then the black is this matte oil painting that one of my studio mates, Liz, had forever. And I probably shouldn't have used it. It was so toxic, but the result was worth every unmasked breath that I took.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, really beautiful. It's like, it's so matte and perfect. And I did 3 of these. This is actually a triptych. The 3 of them vary because I couldn't make them identical, but the originals are a triptych. The one on the right is a print that I worked on during quarantine. Once I started to feel better and my partner got into a better place, I was like, you know what, I really want to do a screen print. And I had worked with this company, K-Rock, they're in Greenpoint. I had worked with them before on another print about 5 or 6 years ago, and they do such a great job.
Really
and it took, I mean, it took months. It took months and months to get it here because the textures are a little weird and different. They don't translate to the print exactly. And so we had to find a way to create texture without actually having the paint from the original through the texture. So we changed the background and added this like kind of sandpaper feel to the background. And I mean, I couldn't be happier. She's like a fucking panther. And that's exactly how I envisioned these particular Grace Jones portraits to come out, as like, you know, like just this panther, this gorgeous panther.
The positioning of the portrait, as you would, you know, the way that she's coming off from the left field vision and moving towards the center and in a real active way. I appreciate that you said panther because, you know, but that, again, the black matte is so, it's just unapologetically black, which I love so much. And, you know, it's kind of like this washy feeling you've got in the background too, gives it more rawness and movement in the back, you know, as if, you know, she's running through, you know, kind of, you also can't avoid, you know, looking only at the figure jutting away or towards something, you know. The movement's really fantastic. And can you tell me how many editions did you do with this? You did it with K-Rock and
I did an edition of 25.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something small and special, but also make it affordable. The originals aren't so affordable, but they are, when that's your price point, you know.
What are the originals priced at, Lindsay?
Well, it's a triptych, and they're actually in LA right now. So pandemic shows got canceled, and there's a show in Los Angeles called Unwrapped, and it's been July, August, September was supposed to open. So hopefully it'll now open in October. But these works, this triptych is a part of that show, and so I'm hoping folks in LA can get out to see it. When LA opens up and things are right out there.
So how long is the show? Has it been extended due to?
It keeps on getting extended, and the curator, she's really fantastic. Her name is Sarah Griffin, and she is just like, it's happening. Don't you worry. We have all our ducks in a row. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, of course you do. At this point, I ship my work, so my part is over. It's on her, and she's good at what she does. So, we check in and just kind of talk about things, and when it's meant to happen, it'll happen.
Absolutely. Well, I hope folks get to see it IRL in LA.
Yeah.
But having the print is also, it'll be really great. What can you remind me what the size is?
24 by 18.
Okay.
The original is a bit bigger. It's 19 and a half. 25 and a half by 19 and a half. I wanted there had to be a little bit of difference. I didn't want to make something identical to the original, because it didn't feel right. So I came down a little bit on the size, and as you can see, the blacks are very different. But I mean, those peeps at K-Rock just nailed it, and they were super patient with me. And it was just like, when I was finally able to go into their studio, we were just like so happy, and
Do you have any plans to make this work outside of just print under a nice paper? And other commercial items, or have you considered that? I know you've done other graces. Did you have other graces? You've been working on, her iconography for a while.
I have been. I've been working on these grace works for, I think it was 2013. Yeah, about 2013. I can actually tell you. So the top middle was one of the original ones that I did, and this is the Slave to the Rhythm album. And then on the bottom, the one on the left and right is the nightclubbing silhouette, and those three were the first ones that I did, and I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know if I can pull this off. I just really don't know. And I sat with them for a long time. And then there was a point where it's like, a friend asked me, she's like, what are you doing with those grace works? And I'm like, oh, I don't know yet. It's just, they're not done. They're just not done. So it was to a point I was in my studio, and I was like, what am I going to do with these? Like, they have to have some life, but for me, they were unfinished. And at that point is the glitter came in, and I was like, oh, this needs glitter. This needs to sparkle. And after that, it just sort of clicked. It was like, yeah, I'm just gonna, go in and make it as disco as possible.
I get poppy, too. I mean, they've got a really loose, yet they do have a quickness about them, like a gestural ability to kind of like, also I can see how you were like, I don't know, these are finished, these are kind of sketches. And as you kind of repeat the not only iconography of this pop star, but also just addressing again how important she was to other people growing up in queer bodies, and this kind of repetition of both having both a femme and this, toughness about her, them, I think, and maybe please speak to this better than me, but can, give that voyeur, that fan, just a little bit more normalness within their own selves by seeing someone, a celebrity of sorts.
Right. Well, I don't think Grace is far from normal. Like she's just out there. There's nothing normal about Grace Jones. I'm not going to get into any stories right now, but for me, I think that growing up feeling other and more other than just being queer, but also other in my blackness. Like I think for Black bodies in general, Grace Jones was like, oh, it was like Grace Jones, Prince, and Rick James. They were like the crazy mofos who just like did not care. Betty Davis, shout out to Nakomi, because my friend Nakomi just embodies Betty Davis. And I'm not talking about Betty Davis eyes. I'm talking about Miles Davis' ex-wife, the Queen of Funk. There weren't a lot of these people in mainstream. Grace was very mainstream, even though she was on the fringe, but you saw Grace Jones everywhere and all over the world, all over the world. I remember seeing her on Johnny Carson, or maybe it was like Joan Rivers was hosting Johnny Carson, and she was talking about Dolph Lundgren, and she said, "Oh, he has a twin, and I'm dating them both." So there, her characters, all of her characters that she played, when she came out of the box in Pee-wee's Playhouse for Christmas, I mean, that was so amazing, and just so much about her stuck with me. In childhood, where I was like, no, I want that Grace Jones record. I want that Grace Jones poster. I'm gonna get this Prince thing, and so I did sort of gravitate towards artists who were more androgynous, but also very flamboyant with their sexuality.
Sure. Yeah, I think this was well before the mainstream drag, before RuPaul went not saying that Grace is drag, yet she embodies this like hyper femme fierceness in other ways too. So I think that she wasn't normalized per se, but she was definitely a unique part of pop culture in the early 80s, and having that be introduced to those viewers, I appreciate that. But this has become work that you kind of return to in terms of
Yeah.
intersectionality, but I think there's also a time where that work had become part of didn't you have it in some television show or something recently?
Yes. Ta-da. A very dear friend of mine, Leah Hamilton, she's worked in the arts for years, and she's worked in film and television, specifically with Spike Lee and others. She is a curator, art advisor, and she knows everybody. Everybody knows Leah Hamilton. And she had approached me and said, hey, what do you think about doing this for this show? And I'm like, hey, yes. So you don't really know if your work is going to appear or how it's going to appear. Someone could walk past it and you might be like, oh, wait, was that it? So it was really just like, oh my God. It was in season 3 of Insecure and this past season 4 of Insecure. And this past season, it really got a lot of, like, it was actually like a part of the scene with Issa Rae. And, for me, it was like, I got very, very excited. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. It feels surreal, but also you're like, people are calling me and texting me and being like, did I? And I'm like, yeah, you did. So, that was all very exciting, but it definitely wouldn't have happened without Leah Hamilton and her, our relationship and her reaching out and saying, do this.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, how you can it's not so much the commercialization, but maybe the your copyright kind of turns into even farther reach than if you showed work in a gallery or whatnot. I'm just really curious about having that connection with Leah Hamilton, which is so powerful and wonderful. It's who a lot of times, isn't it? But it's also a point where this is an exciting attribute to your practice. It's also
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah.
more like an incorporative kind of placement of your work in a commercial slash not even commercial, but just like in entertainment. And I wondered, did it felt good. It feels like it felt really good, but did you get to bankroll this or
No, you definitely get paid. I'm not going to give the amount, but it's a paycheck, and it's like, yes, thank you. Yeah, it's not just like, hey, I didn't get this phone call with, we really love your work, we'd like to feature it on this little HBO show called Insecure, but by the way, we think you just want to do it for shits and giggles and not a paycheck, that regardless of Insecure's budget, this is HBO, and I feel that it was very special for me. I love Issa Rae, and I've always been a fan of hers, back from Awkward Black Girl when it was the web series. I love the show Insecure. It's really fantastic. And so of course I was like, yeah, let's do this, and it's great. So
yeah, all trifecta things, all the things
yeah.
came together. I ask kind of boldly about that because
well, it gets negotiated every season. A new season, it gets renegotiated. So
what is it like? I was wondering if it's like by views or by scene, or if it gets negotiated, just like, hey, it's going to be in the apartment.
Okay, so this was by episode, I believe. I could be wrong. Leah, let me know if I'm wrong, but I know she will. But, I think this was by episode. I don't quite remember, because they also used this in a promo, so it was a little bit different. It was also in in a couple of scenes, so maybe it was season. I don't remember exactly what that was, but it was. I was very happy with how things worked out.
Absolutely. I mean, just like a quick story to tell you that I was working with an artist where, well, let me just be blunt. My wife, our daughter, watching TV in Chicago with her father, and Divorce came on, the television program that I understand Sarah Jessica Parker. I don't know. I never seen Divorce. I have no idea.
Right.
But all of a sudden, our daughter text Liz and said, "Oh my God, Mommy Lizzie, I see your work on this television show. It's your work." And we were like, "What show, huh?" And then she started getting all these texts. "I saw your work on Divorce." And never had any contract, never had any just permission, nothing. Someone and faked her work.
Oh.
And put it on a television show.
Yeah, that definitely didn't happen.
No, I know it didn't happen, but I'm just, I'm asking all these deep questions because, like, the artists do taken advantage of. This is free publicity, free that. Oh well, it looked like your work. You're not getting credit for it, but it wasn't yours. So we just were inspired by your work. You just folks got to watch out for this kind of stuff. And who would have thought? Our at the time she was a nine-year-old daughter would have recognized. Her work, but I mean, when you get the credit where credit's due, and you get the paycheck where the paycheck's due, and you got it, then I mean, I think it makes sense, right?
Studios aren't free. It's getting the paycheck. Excuse me. Of course, not only, but when people acknowledge that it's your work, and they say, "Hey Liz, we saw this work, we have this." Everybody has some kind of budget, because it's everybody has some kind of budget, and just to say, look, you know, as we go, you know, things will change, but you know, let's honor the fact that this is your work and we really love it, and you know, let's work something out.
Like, let me write a cease and desist letter to whoever does divorce. I don't even know. But anyway, moving on. I'm
Okay.
really interested in knowing more about your sculptural practice too, because you know we've been focusing.
Right. Let's. Can we do this? All
Mhm.
right. Egg base. So this right here is sort of the raw, freshly out of their molds. Egg base that I'm specific. These are specifically for an installation I'm working on, to actually see if it'll work. I'm devoting the next few months to really focus on this installation. Yeah, to see if it'll work. But we can go here.
What are you nervous about it working? Is it just like
But
mold?
there's a lot of, I'm working with elements that I haven't worked with before, and yeah, it's the amount of them that I'm that I'm creating it's a lot. It's thousands. So it doesn't make me nervous, but I'm just like, okay, 449 down, you know. And you know, so it's kind of an endless process, but I'm giving myself the next few months to really focus on um, creating this installation in my studio and seeing how it could work. You know, I'll have like a little private thing here where I'll get feedback from people, and how they, you know, people respond to it, because it has sound to it. It has, it'll have film, video aspects. And so it's something very new, not sound and film. I have a background in film, but marrying them with the sculptures, it's new. But that's all I kind of can talk about it right now, because
Okay,
it's the, you know, it's constantly, you know, I think about things and I'm just like, huh. And I'll just start talking and somebody's like, what? And I'm like, oh, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about this thing that I need to do, that I'm doing. So it's evolving. It's constantly evolving, and
what,
I feel confident with just having the space to focus on doing that. That, you know, in a few months I'll have something to show that could be exciting, or you know, or not. We'll see.
very, very cool. Before we go on too much further, I know these and some other works of the egg bees are on Artfare, and
Yes. These particular works are on Artfare. So these sculptures, they, how do I start with talking about these? So these sculptures for me are more like totems. Um, they're offerings, and an egg bee, the actual egg bee, what it means is it's like your spiritual companion. It's a guide, an afterlife guide. And so these works speak to ancestors and armies of ancestors that we as people of color have with us, especially in this country. So creating the egg bees, and having these different forms come to life, and with these textures, for me it was like, oh, this is Olokun, this is an Orisha who is in like control of everything below the ocean, the depths of the ocean. And I was like, oh, this texture reminds me of barnacles. So it just kind of started from, you know, the idea of the Middle Passage, and how souls were left crossing the Atlantic, and the idea of these souls attaching itself to other things to become more life, you know, in the water, in the bottom of the ocean, to continue life and create life. So that's where these more, I guess, decorative egg bees came into play for me when I started making them.
You said decorative. I mean, I find them aesthetic.
Well, yeah, because I mean, they're pretty. They're fucking pretty, and I like that. But where I'm at now, when I'm creating this other body of work, this really big body of work, they're still beautiful, but they don't have these these little details that that I intentionally had had come through on these sculptures.
And these are molds that we kind of saw a little taste of in that first slide, but the materials that are comprised of these egbies, spiritual guides, an object that represents a spiritual guide, even potentially heirloom, a kind of artifact of sorts, is is color important to you? Are these like, and they're plaster, and what else? And how are you negotiating like
so it's plaster. Plaster is, the solid base to them that binds everything together. But what you're actually looking at are different size paper punch holes. And how about this? I have this little sheet here. So I'm gonna stand up a little bit and see if everyone can sort of see these in my hands. You see them?
Yeah, I mean, we can stop sharing the screen, but I think I can see them in little.
Okay, so it might be difficult to actually share them. So they're different size and weights of paper that are, some of the paper's laminated, some of it's not. It's all different weights. Some of it is like just simple printing paper, where others a harder cardstock. And that's the textures that you're seeing in these egbies. And what they reminded me of were barnacles, were shells, and that's speaking to Yamaya, the goddess of the ocean, and her relationship with Olokun. This is very much about the sea, very much a kind of like a poem to the lost souls in the Middle Passage.
That's really delicate and beautiful and heavy at the same time. And when you create these works, are they singular objects to hold and to be carried with? Do you want them on pedestals? Do you, when how do you prefer them being displayed?
Well, I mean, I guess a good question. I think let me move a slide. Oh, these are so beautiful. We could come back to this maybe, but there's the one after this that really shows. So like an army, I would like them displayed like an army, like in this fighting position, but also it's offensive and defensive position. It's both, it's not just this one thing. But yeah, this would be the ideal way of having them displayed.
Yeah, I mean, even in this installation of these works, and I know that they're not that large. I mean, they only stand about 5 inches tall, maybe even less. But as the ones in the foreground, the avant-garde.
So you can actually, these are some. These are something. This is like a study of an idea that I have, where I'm like, I don't know if I like it, but they're they're about 3.5 inches height. These are heavy, which I love. Some of them are really light, and the others have more weight to them than you think, and I love that. I love the surprise of someone saying, "Oh, can I pick that up?" And I'm like, "Sure," and they do, and they're like, "Ooh." Yeah.
Well, I mean, they have very heavy attributes in relationship to both the metaphor of the middle passage as well as the plaster that they
Yeah.
contain, right? And the
Yeah.
less paper, then, the more weight it's going to contain. I mean, it's so wonderful to even discuss these kind of congruous terms with, both the weight of our ancestors, specifically the African American community, coming from slaves and this middle passage. The one thing I really notice about this um, assemblage slash installation of these many works, the avant-garde that I was saying earlier, like how the forward has been the most broken, and as they go and recede, they
Yeah.
become whole. And I think about how genetics travel and our DNA of trauma travels, and how suicide can be hereditary, and
Yeah.
always the
Yeah.
things like trauma from the depression, which wasn't even that long ago, which we're in another depression now, from 100 years ago versus 400 years ago, 600 years ago, how our bodies carry this. Think about it a lot, but these do feel like forms, figures, bodies. And yeah, I suppose there's not really a question there, Valincy. I just appreciate and really value the thoughtfulness that goes into such a simple shape, yet really, formed with such great care. I also just interested in, you mentioned the Orisha and you mentioned Yoruba tradition of ancestors past. And I know that, practicing ritualistic magic in some people's verbiage, maybe folks are interested, yet there's also a kind of knowledge base or research base that I
Mhm.
think you're also talking to. So maybe you could address that a little bit.
Right. Yeah. No. See, for this, I feel like, you know, I call the work, my complete body of work, artifacts and heirlooms. And this idea of this looks old, it looks like it's been unearthed. This is an artifact, but also an heirloom, something that's passed down. And I feel like I grew up seeing these objects, different iteration of them, but in my grandmother's home, in my aunt's home, in cousin's home, and even relatives that aren't blood related, that were relatives growing up. There was always something, and where altars existed, that there would be certain things that people would keep on their altars, and this is definitely a part of that. Um, I tend to not go into the practice of it, because for some people it's really sacred, and I do respect that. But there are these objects that I create that are directly, in conversation with certain practices. So I like to work with discarded materials. It's something that I just love coming across something on the street and being like, I wonder what I could do with that. And it just so happens that I have access to a lot of discarded paper from, binders and, catalogs and things like that from a binary mailing company. And so there would be like an object like this that is really spiritual, and it's something that helps clean and cleaning yourself and your spiritual surroundings. But it's also it's made out of paper. These are different, these are just paper that's been cut, and then it's plaster, and the gold leaf ties it all in. And I make them out of many different kind of.
Mm-hmm. They feel like for lack of a better term, kind of like floggers, or like the
Well, it depends. Some, a lot of people see them, they're like, ooh, then other people see them, they're like, ah. And it's open to interpretation, I can't tell you how to see what you see, and I don't want to tell you that. I want you to experience what I'm making in
that
an
they meant
authentic to you.
performative though. I mean, are they meant, performative is a terrible word. It's just like, are they meant to be used? Functional? I mean, they're objects.
These are not functional. These are more decorative in this way. I mean, you could try to use them. I did make one that is absolutely functional. But it's more of like, so yeah, I can't see someone using this in a performance or anything, because it's paper. It's very delicate. It's paper, so it's not meant to actually be used as a flogger. It's meant to represent something spiritual and something cleansing, which flogging does.
Oh, flogging, yeah, of course, flogging is yes.
Yeah. So there is that. Another material I work with that people are always really surprised with when they find out what it is. I work a lot with pistachio shells. I hand paint them, and it's a lot of work, but they're beautiful. And those for me are kind of like a symbol of a cowrie shell, and I absolutely love making them. If you're looking in these gold egg bees, you can sort of see the tops, and those are pistachio shells in some of them. The previous egg bees that I showed you, those shells coming out are pistachio shells, and it's just a matter of you have everything you need around you to create beautiful art. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm moving on. The egg bees I can talk about for a really long time. I need like
okay
3 minutes.
So here's some more objects. These are just speaking to the materials I use. These are formed with what's it called? Twine. It's cotton twine. And then I dip them in plaster and mold them to come in these shapes. And these are chains. These are however you want to interpret a chain. Like this is gold. This is for the culture, and I think they're beautiful. So these are Shrunken Heads. I did these works years ago, and I was using tape to score these color paintings I was making. And then I had all of this discarded material, and I'm like, well, what do you can't throw away evidence of what you just did, make something with it. And so I made these series of Shrunken Heads with the tape and also plaster bandage. Plaster has been a reoccurring, is like it's my material. So I did this bust of Nefertiti with twine. The innards are tape and with glass beads. So yeah, this is the Oroku. This is the one that's actually functional, and this is made out of twine and rolled in plaster and dried and then gessoed. It was a lot of work, but it's really beautiful. But the handle is all tape, and I made this actually in Puerto Rico. I was at a residency in Carolina, and it's just this work that I made there was definitely it was incredible, and yeah, it was a spiritual thing for sure. Okay, and these are some works on paper. These tie back into the Middle Passage. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier before we started, and I create it's on vellum, and I create these with this wire mesh, and it's a print, and it's print placed over and over again, and why I call them barracoons, because this kind of symbolizes cargo, black cargo, and bodies through the Middle Passage. And the one to the right, the gold one, I actually made that with just window screening. In person, there's so much detail to it, and it's really beautiful. But also these have the shape of a sarcophagus. And I felt like that was really important, to not actually have the shape of the actual slave ships, but to also kind of expand on you know, what that journey was. I mean, it was a complete kidnapping of my ancestors brought to this country. And you know, this is speculative evidence, is what I call it, of that. And you know, the work is here, and it's something. Oh, it's actually back here, and it's something that I'm working to push forward with the Egby installation that I'm working on. More work. These are the most current works with the paper punch holes. This one on the left is made of burlap and plaster, and it's about 8 feet tall. It's really intense, and the textures on it is beautiful. And this is directly in honor of Yemaya. The one to the right is it's the newer work, some of this newer work that I've been working on, and it's a little bit different than the one to the left, but I just wanted to sort of show a difference in use of material and narrative. Okay, this is one of the very first works that I sold, and it is linen strips, tape, plaster strips, and spray paint. And it was the very first work that I sold to a collector, and was just so happy to sell work and to have someone say, this is amazing, I want it. How much? And you tell them, they're like, no, this much. And you're like, okay, I'll take it. So I wanted to, I did want to include this, because this was like the point where I'm like, okay, this is gonna work. I feel like this is gonna work. So Little Rock 9, this exhibit was curated by Ajamu Walker, extremely talented painter, also my studio mate. Love you, Ajamu. He put together a phenomenal group of artists for this exhibit, and it was at the Sheen Center, which is downtown in Bleecker Street. And while this was happening, there was also a play about the Little Rock Nine, who the surviving members came to the performance and to the opening of the show, which was so powerful. It was absolutely incredible. The work you're seeing on the flyer is the work of Kimberly Beacoat, who's a phenomenal artist. And this is the work, Gold Standard, that I created for the show, the sculpture that I made. And this, I'm just going to break down the materials a little bit. It's packing paper. It's these, you know, when you get a package and it has all this brown paper kind of rolled up into it, I took and saved that paper and kind of, you know, decreased it and folded it in this particular way, painted it with gesso. Yeah, there's many layers of this paper, and the weight that it has to it is outstanding, and it's just a beautiful piece. This is a show I did, a group show, the Every Woman Biennial, which is a great thing that happens. And actually, I'm so happy that this piece is here. This is how I met Daniela. She went to the show and saw this work and reached out to me. And then within a week, she came to my studio here in Brooklyn. And that's how I got introduced to Artfare. So thank you, Daniela.
Yes, Daniela, my colleague.
She's fantastic. This is installation of earlier work. So you could see this color work, and this is what I was using the tape to score with. So this work is in direct conversation with the Shrunken Head sculptures. This gold work is featured in Elle Decor. I was very happy to have Afro chic reach out and say, hey, we're doing this project, would you like to be a part of it? And so this was this was that. Just some, some things that happen. Okay, so here's the Grace Triptych, and this is in, they're in LA right now, but the show will happen when it happens. And I was just able to sort of be like, can you just snap it of wherever? This is not its permanent installation, but Sarah was able to get me this photo, actually snatched it from her stories.
I really appreciate the fact that the work is already placed in a location that someone is enjoying.
Yeah, no, it's great, and that's the end of my deck, my presentation.
Yeah, let's unshare that screen so I can see more of Valincy. There we go. Yeah. Wow, that's just, there's so much. I know we buzzed through the end, and some of the,
yeah, we did, yeah,
some of the prints that's behind you, I was wondering, you using screen, you continue to bring in gold into your work. So like, this will be like one of my last questions, I think, unless other folks have questions. Please go ahead and chat that up, and I'll relay that to Valincy. Valincy can read it herself. But what is gold is a reoccurring theme in a lot of the work. I mean, I can push the intention in so many ways, but I want to hear from you.
Right. Well, gold is that precious metal that comes from the earth, and you have to unearth it. And I also, for me, it's about the culture, like a gold tooth. Shout out to Helen with the gold teeth. There is a love of gold in the culture, and that is something that I will always circle back to. I love it, and it plays so well with the plaster. And yeah, it's always there will always be hints of gold in my work. It'll be, some things are more subtle than others. But no, when I do gold, I go big with it. I do. I'm like, no, here is this big ass gold painting. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a question from Pamela Council, and they're asking, maybe I missed it, where is your Egun education from?
Okay, so I was hoping someone would talk about that. My education comes from my family. It's something that has been practiced in my family since my grandmother, her grandmother, and it's something that I grew up in I grew up with it.
And that's the best way to educate yourself, I suppose, with that experience. I mean, other ways are perfectly acceptable, yet it's embedded in you. And the vocabulary, of course, like I'm trying to get up to speed, like understanding the references, the deities.
Yeah.
Lack of a better term, tell me, but do you feel like you're navigating direct ancestry through these works?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that, because I do. I often feel like there's a push of my hand from the ancestors to do this work. So thank you, Pamela, for asking that.
Yeah, it would be remiss not to notice the way that things are coming together, both with object and the thought and the idea. We are LOL, one more. One more, I bet. She's asking a question. We've got one more minute. We have one more minute for Pamela Council's question. She's on a roll.
How do I decide what I want to share? I saw that. The thing is, I used to covet my work and not want to share it as much. But the deeper I get into my practice, I make something, I do want to share it. Something that's also having the vocabulary to go with what I am actually sharing makes it a little bit easier, because when I'm creating work, I don't always necessarily have, you know, this academic idea of what I'm doing step by step, but I know what I'm doing and I know what I want it to be. So I just have to really push through whatever self-doubt I have, and, you know, let that confidence shine through and say, you know, share it. People will love it or they won't love it. That's okay. That's on them. It's not on me. I can't force anybody to love my work. That's, you know, their experience, and I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Definitely. This has been so
Thank you, Pamela.
enlightening. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you and be able to have followed your work since you've been on Artfare, and just it's really wonderful to talk to you, Valincy. I hope that we can do an in-person studio visit sometime soon.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for joining. Thank everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
This is great. This is fantastic. Thank you so
So
much.
much knowledge and history and some of your ancestries that are like floating around in this space right now. Like look at they're around. Really appreciate it. Next week we have Dana Robinson, who's also an Artfare artist. We're going to talk. Carolina Wheats, and this was Valincy Jean Patelli. If you missed anything, I'm going to upload it on YouTube in the next few days with reliable Wi-Fi. And we're really thankful to have you. And I also just want to address the fact that we've gone through some pretty heavy last 24 hours. And I want to give my most deepest condolences to the strife and the mourning and the grief that we have to witness with the death and the lack of accountability for Breonna Taylor. Anyway, I just wanted to shout that out.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And yeah, you know, yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for sticking with it for an hour. That's a long time. But thank you also, Carolina, and thank everyone from Artfare.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. All right, man.
Okay.
Enjoy the fall.
Thank you, you too. Bye.
Bye.